The words hit me like a physical blow, a cold, sharp blade to the gut. My wife Sarah sat across from me at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone, a slight smirk on her face. "Honestly, your parents are just so trashy," she said, not even looking up. "Did you see what they wore to brunch? Like they just rolled out of bed. It's embarrassing, Mark, truly. I just can't believe I have to pretend to be related to people like that." I froze, my fork clattering onto my plate. Trashy, embarrassing. These weren't new words from Sarah when it came to my folks, but they always stung. Every single time my parents, the people who raised me, who worked their fingers to the bone, who loved me unconditionally. My father, a retired mechanic with grease forever under his nails, but a heart bigger than anyone I knew. My mother, a former seamstress, whose hands might have been rough from years of fabric and needles, but who still made the best chicken soup in the world. They were humble, sure. They weren't rich, they weren't fancy. They didn't wear designer clothes or drive luxury cars, but they were good people, kind people, and Sarah called them trash. I opened my mouth to retort, to defend them as I always did, but the words died in my throat. 'Cause that very morning, before Sarah even woke up, I checked our joint bank account. And I'd seen something that made my stomach drop, something so utterly impossible, so mind-boggling, that I'd stared at the screen for 10 solid minutes, convinced I was hallucinating. Sarah had debt, a lot of debt, student loans from her expensive private university, credit card debt from years of keeping up with her wealthier friends, a small car loan. It had always been a source of stress for her, a dark cloud hanging over her otherwise sunny disposition. We talked about it, made repayment plans that never quite worked out, argued about it sometimes. She hated it. She hated feeling beholden to it, hated the constant weight. She often said it was the biggest burden in her life. She'd even joked darkly that she wished someone would just wave a magic wand and make it disappear. Well, someone had. The amount was staggering, over $80,000. Her student loans, her credit cards, even the last bit of her car loan, all zeroed out. Gone. The statements showed payments posted within the last 48 hours. And the kicker? The payments hadn't come from our accounts or from her family's. There was a transaction ID, a reference number, and a name attached to the bank transfer, a name I knew. My mother's name, my trash parents, my humble blue collar, always struggling to make ends meet. Parents had just paid off over $80,000 of my wife's debt. The woman who at this very moment was calling them trashy and embarrassing. My head spun. The sudden rush of blood made my ears ring. How? How did they even get that kind of money? They weren't wealthy. They lived frugally, saved what little they could, always worried about retirement. I knew they had some savings, but this was a fortune to them. This was their life's blood, their security, perhaps even their entire retirement nest egg. And they had given it to Sarah. Sarah, who despised them. Sarah, who found them beneath her. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth, sharper than any anger I'd felt before. My parents, in their incredible selfless love for me, and by extension for the woman I married, had given everything to someone who clearly thought so little of them. "Mark, are you even listening?" Sarah's voice cut through my thoughts, tinged with irritation. She finally looked up from her phone, her eyes bright, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. "Seriously, you need to talk to them about their clothes and their awful table manners. Did you see your dad chew with his mouth open? It's barbaric." I stared at her, really stared at her, seeing her for the first time in a new light. Her pretty face, usually so charming, now seemed to twist into something ugly and shallow. Her words, once just annoying background noise, now felt like a betrayal. a monumental, soul-crushing betrayal. How could she be so blind, so arrogant, so utterly unaware of the sacrifice that had just been made for her, and by the very people she so casually dismissed as trash? My chest tightened, a burning sensation spreading from my heart. It wasn't just anger. It was a profound, aching sadness. Sadness for my parents, who had given so much and received so little in return but scorn. Sadness for myself, for somehow having fallen in love with and married a woman who possessed such a cruel streak, a woman who lacked basic gratitude or empathy. I picked up my fork, my hand trembling slightly. I couldn't eat. The food tasted like ash. My mind raced, trying to process this impossible situation. Do I confront her now? Do I confront my parents? How do I even begin to unspool this tangled mess? The silence in the kitchen stretched, thick and heavy, broken only by the clinking of Sarah's phone as she continued scrolling. She still hadn't noticed my distress. She probably thought I was just having another one of my quiet moments, letting her words wash over me. She often did, but this wasn't a quiet moment. This was a turning point. This was the moment I realized that the foundation of my marriage, the very bedrock of trust and respect, might have just crumbled into dust. Because my trash parents had just paid off her debt, and she had no idea the earthquake it was about to cause. My stomach churned. This was going to be a long, painful day. It wasn't always like this, or maybe it was. And I was just too blind, too caught up in the shiny newness of Sarah to see the cracks forming. When I first met Sarah, she was everything I thought I wanted. Smart, funny, beautiful, with an ambition that intimidated and attracted me in equal measure. She came from a different world than mine, a world of boutique coffee shops and art galleries, while I grew up around auto parts stores and backyard barbecues. I thought our differences were charming, something to learn from. My parents, bless their hearts, were immediately welcoming. When I first brought Sarah home to meet them, my mom cooked a huge Italian feast, enough food to feed an army. My dad, usually a man of few words, made an effort to engage Sarah in conversation, asking about her studies, her interests. They were a little awkward maybe, in their best clothes that were still a bit worn, in our small, cozy house that wasn't exactly Pinterest perfect. But their warmth was genuine, their smiles wide. Sarah was polite. Too polite now that I look back. Her responses were clipped, her smiles a little too fixed. She complimented Mom's cooking, but barely touched her plate. She answered Dad's questions with polite brevity, then quickly turned back to me, talking about her day at the university, almost as if my parents weren't there. I remember thinking, she's just shy. It's a lot, meeting the parents. How naive I was. The first real red flag, though, came a few months later. My mom had knitted Sarah a scarf for her birthday. Mon was incredibly proud of her knitting, making unique, intricate designs. This scarf was a beautiful shade of blue, Sarah's favorite color, and Mom had spent weeks on it. When I gave it to Sarah, she opened the gift with a polite thank you, then pulled it out of the box. She held it up, looking at it with a strange expression. "Oh," she said, and then a pause. "It's rustic. Rustic. Not beautiful, not thoughtful, not even nice. Just rustic." I saw the look on her face, a faint wrinkle of her nose, like she'd smelled something unpleasant. She folded it carefully, put it back in the box, and placed it on the counter. She never wore it. I found it in the back of her closet months later, still in the box, untouched. My mom had asked about it a few times, wondering if Sarah liked it, and I'd always mumbled some excuse, a lie. "Oh, she loves it, Mom. She's just waiting for the weather to get colder." The lie tasted bitter even then. As time went on, the comments became less subtle. She'd sigh dramatically if we had to go to my parents' house for dinner. Do we have to? Their house smells like old socks and potpourri. It's so weird. She'd roll her eyes when my dad told one of his favorite, slightly rambling stories about his mechanic shop day. Oh God, not this one again. Can't he talk about something interesting for once? She started making comparisons. Her parents, who lived in a much larger, newer house, who traveled often, who bought her expensive gifts. She never said directly, "Your parents aren't good enough," but the implication was always there. My parents would never let their house get so cluttered. My parents know how to dress for an occasion. My parents understand fine dining. It was always about how they measured up, and how they always, in her eyes, fell short. I defended them, of course, at first with passion. "Sarah, they're my parents. They're good people. They worked hard for everything they have. They're kind." And she just waved a dismissive hand. Yes, kind. But Phi here is a difference between kind and cultured, Mark. T here is a certain level of sophistication that I am used to, and your parents just don't have it. Eventually, I grew tired of the arguments. It was like banging my head against a brick wall. She just didn't see them the way I did. Or she did, and she just didn't care. I started to minimize it. She's just a bit snobby sometimes, I'd tell myself. She's from a different background. She'll get used to them. She'll learn to appreciate their good hearts, even if they don't fit her ideal image. I convinced myself that her love for me would eventually extend to the people who made me. I hoped. I prayed. When we got married, my parents, beaming with pride, pulled out all the stops for our modest wedding. My mom made my dad wear a suit. He hadn't worn since his own wedding, probably. They brought a slightly lopsided, homemade cake that Mom insisted on baking herself, a family recipe. Sarah, of course, had insisted on a professional, expensive cake. My mom's cake sat on a separate table, mostly untouched, another small sting. So when Sarah called them trashy and embarrassing at brunch, it wasn't a sudden outburst. It was the culmination of years of quiet disdain, of subtle jabs, of unspoken judgments. It was a festering wound I had tried to ignore, hoping it would heal on its own. But now, with the knowledge of my parents' incredible, heartbreaking sacrifice, that wound had burst open, and I could finally see the true ugliness that lay beneath. And I knew with a chilling certainty that the wound wasn't in them. It was in her, and in me, for letting it go on for so long. The words hung in the air, a silent accusation. Trashy. Embarrassing, my parents. And somewhere out there was the proof of their unimaginable generosity. A generosity extended to the very person spitting those words. My mind was reeling. I couldn't just sit there. I had to know. I had to see if she knew. "Sarah," I said, my voice hoarse, barely a whisper. My hands were clenched under the table, my knuckles white. "Can I ask you something?" She finally put her phone down, a hint of annoyance flickering in her eyes. "What is it, Mark? You are acting weird. Your debt," I began, choosing my words carefully. "The student loans, the credit cards. You've been so stressed about it, right?" A flash of something crossed her face. Surprise, confusion, then a quick mask of nonchalance. "Yes, obviously. It's a nightmare. Why?" "Well," I took a deep breath. "I was looking at the bank account this morning, and I noticed something strange." I paused, letting the words hang. I watched her closely. Her eyes darted away for a second, then back to me, a sudden tension in her shoulders. "All your debts, Sarah, they're gone. completely paid off. For a moment, she was genuinely speechless. Her mouth opened, then closed. "What are you talking about?" she finally managed, her voice thin. "That's impossible. They're huge. No one just pays off that kind of money." "Well, someone did," I said, pushing the screenshot of the bank transfer across the table. Her mother's name. My mother's name. Clear as day. She snatched the phone, staring at the screen. Her face went pale, then flushed. She scrolled frantically, checking the dates, the amounts. Her jaw was tight. This has to be a mistake," she mumbled, more to herself than to me. "A system error, or maybe my parents did something. They've been talking about helping out, but I didn't think..." "Your parents?" I pressed. "Sarah, it clearly says Dorothy Williams. That's my mom's name." She flinched. She looked up at me, her eyes hardening. "Could be anyone, Mark. Lots of people have that name. It's a common name. You are being ridiculous." "It's the right bank account, Sarah. The right transfer ID. It's my mother's name, and it's the exact amount you owe, down to the last cent. This isn't a coincidence." My voice was low, laced with an anger I was struggling to control. "They paid it off, didn't they? My parents paid off your debt." Then came the lie. The brazen, outright lie. "No!" she practically shouted, slamming the phone down on the table. "Absolutely not. Why would they do something like that? They don't have that kind of money. You said yourself they're struggling, and even if they did, why would they waste it on me? It makes no sense." "You are imagining things. It's probably a bank error, I told you. Or maybe a distant relative of mine I don't even know. Or maybe it's a scam. You are being so paranoid." Her voice was rising, her denials becoming more desperate, more indignant. She was putting on a show, trying to convince me, and perhaps herself, that this was anything but the truth. But the look in her eyes, the way she couldn't quite meet my gaze directly, the frantic energy of her protests, it all screamed fabrication. My heart sank further. Not only had my parents made this incredible sacrifice, but Sarah was actively trying to deny it, to lie about it, to erase their act of kindness. Why? Was it shame? Was it pride? Or was it simply that she couldn't bear the thought of being beholden to people she deemed trash? "Sarah," I said, my voice chillingly calm, "I know it's them, and I think you know it too." She scoffed, crossing her arms over her chest, a defensive posture. "This is ridiculous, Mark. You are making a huge deal out of nothing. It's probably just a glitch. Let me call the bank. I'll clear it up." She didn't reach for the phone. Instead, she stood up abruptly. "I am going for a walk. This conversation is insane." She turned and stalked out of the kitchen, leaving me alone with the silence, the cold food, and the undeniable evidence on my phone screen. I sat there for a long time, the weight of her lie pressing down on me. She didn't want them to get credit. She didn't want to acknowledge their generosity. She would rather invent a phantom relative or a bank error than admit that my humble blue-collar parents had just saved her. From years of financial struggle, the disrespect was staggering. The dishonesty was a betrayal I hadn't anticipated. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't let this go. I had to talk to my parents. I had to understand how this happened, and I had to confirm it beyond a shadow of a doubt. Because if what I suspected was true, then Sarah's casual cruelty just moments before, calling them trash, took on a whole new, horrifying dimension. And I knew, with a terrible certainty, that my marriage would never be the same. The drive to my parents' house felt interminable. Each mile was a burden. each turn of the wheel bringing me closer to a truth I both dreaded and desperately needed to hear. Sarah had been gone for hours, still on her walk, probably avoiding me. The silence in our apartment had been deafening, amplifying my internal turmoil. When I pulled up to their familiar, modest house, I felt a pang of nostalgia, quickly overshadowed by the heavy knot in my stomach. The porch swing creaked gently in the breeze. My dad's old pickup truck was parked in the driveway. Their small garden, tended with care, was blooming. It was exactly as I remembered it, a place of comfort and warmth. And now it was a place of profound sacrifice. My mum answered the door, her face lighting up with a surprised smile. "Mark, what a lovely surprise. Come in, come in. Is everything all right? You usually call before you drop by." "Everything's fine, Mom," I lied, stepping inside. The familiar scent of her potpourri, the very one Sarah complained about, filled the air. It felt like home. My dad emerged from the living room, a newspaper in his hand, a questioning look on his face. "Hey, Dad." We made small talk for a few minutes. About the weather, about work. My heart was pounding. How do I even bring this up? How do I ask them about something so deeply personal, so financially immense? Finally, I took a deep breath. "Mom, Dad," I began, my voice a little shaky. "I need to ask you something important. Something about money." Their expressions shifted, becoming more serious. My mom's brow furrowed slightly. My dad leaned forward, his newspaper set aside. I saw a transaction in our bank account this morning," I continued, choosing my words carefully, trying not to sound accusatory, just seeking answers. My mom's eyes darted to my dad and his to hers. It was a silent conversation, a shared understanding. Then my mom looked back at me, her gaze soft, a little hesitant. "Oh, Mark," she said, her voice quiet. "You saw that, did you?" My dad cleared his throat. We weren't going to tell you to, not right away anyway. We just wanted to do it. No fuss." "But how?" I asked. The word, a raw whisper. "How did you get that kind of money? It's over $80,000. That's everything, isn't it?" My mom sighed, a weary but peaceful sound. "Your Uncle Ben, my brother, you remember him? He passed away a few months ago. He left us a little something, not a huge fortune, but enough to make a difference. We'd been saving for retirement, of course, but it wasn't enough for us to live comfortably for very long. This inheritance, it topped us up, gave us a little cushion. But you used it for Sarah's debt?" I pressed, disbelief still warring with the evidence. My dad nodded, his eyes meeting mine directly. "We've seen how stressed Sarah has been, son. Always worrying about those loans. Always talking about how much of a burden they were. You two are just starting your lives together. We want you to be happy. We want you to be free. And that debt, it was a weight on both of you. We could see it." My mom nodded in agreement, her eyes gentle. "Talked about it for weeks. We don't need fancy things, Mark. We have our home. We have each other. Our biggest wish is for you to be happy. And we figured, if we could help ease that burden for Sarah, it would help you too. A good start, a clean slate. We just want you both to be happy," my dad repeated, his voice earnest. "Family helps family, son. That's what we do." They weren't boasting. They weren't seeking praise. There was no hint of expectation in their voices, no desire for Sarah's gratitude or even recognition. They had done it out of pure, unadulterated love. For me. For the future of my family. The humility of it, the simple, profound selflessness, brought tears to my eyes. "But Mom, Dad," I choked out, a lump forming in my throat. That's an incredible amount of money. Your inheritance, your savings. That was for your future. Our future is seeing you happy, son, my mom said, reaching out to take my hand. Her hand, worn and slightly calloused, felt warm and comforting in mine. And a big part of that is being debt-free. We'll be fine. We've always been careful. We'll manage. The sheer magnanimity of their act overwhelmed me. Here were my parents, humble, unassuming, who had just poured their life savings and an inheritance into freeing Sarah from her financial burdens. And Sarah had called them trash. She had lied about who paid it. She had dismissed their incredible kindness. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them everything. I wanted to tell them how Sarah truly felt, how she spoke about them, how she had lied about their generosity. But looking at their loving, trusting faces, I couldn't. Not yet. How could I shatter their simple happiness, their belief that they were simply helping their son and his wife, with the ugly truth of Sarah's contempt? It would break their hearts. And I couldn't bear to do that. Not after this. So I swallowed the bitter truth, nodded, and tried to smile through my tears. Thank you, I managed, my voice thick with emotion. Thank you, both. You have no idea what this means. They just smiled, content in their secret act of profound love. And I knew with sickening clarity that the chasm between my parents' pure generosity and Sarah's cruel ingratitude was now too wide to ever bridge. I drove home from my parents' house in a daze. The world outside the car window seemed blurry, the details indistinct. My head was buzzing with conflicting emotions, profound gratitude towards my parents, burning anger at Sarah, and a chilling sense of despair about my marriage. The simple, honest love of my parents contrasted so sharply with Sarah's calculated deceit and casual cruelty that it was like looking at two different universes. I knew without a shadow of a doubt that Sarah had lied, not just once but multiple times. She denied their involvement, tried to pass it off as a banking error or a relative of her own. She didn't want their help, or at least she didn't want to acknowledge it. The sheer arrogance of it was breathtaking. To accept such a huge gift, a sacrifice of this magnitude, and then to dismiss the givers as trash and deny their very involvement, was an act of emotional violence. When I finally got back to our apartment, Sarah was there. She was in the living room, pretending to read a book, but I could tell by the stiff way she held herself that she was aware of my presence and anticipating something. The air in the apartment was thick with unspoken tension, heavy with the weight of her lie and my discovery. I walked directly into the living room, my phone in my hand. I didn't sit down, I just stood there looking at her. She avoided my gaze, flipping the page in her book, though I knew she wasn't actually reading. "We need to talk, Sarah," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. I didn't want to shout, though every fiber of my being screamed to. I wanted to be cold, precise. She finally looked up, her expression a mix of defensiveness and a faint tremor of fear. "I thought we already did. You were being crazy, Mark. Obsessed with some conspiracy theory about your parents and my death." "It's not a conspiracy theory, Sarah," I said, holding up my phone. "I just spent 2 hours with my parents. I talked to them. They confirmed it." Her face drained of color. The faint tremor became a visible tremble in her hands. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She had nowhere left to hide. I laid out the facts, calmly, methodically. They used the small inheritance my Uncle Ben left them, combined it with their retirement savings. All of it. They wanted to help you, Sarah. They saw how stressed you were. They want us to have a good start. A clean slate. They love us, Sarah. They did this out of pure, selfless love. As I spoke, her initial shock morphed into something ugly. Her pale face began to flush, a dark red creeping up her neck. Her eyes narrowed. "They told you," she hissed, her voice barely above a whisper laced with fury. Those busybodies. They just had to rub it in, didn't they? Show off their generosity. My blood ran cold. Rub it in? Sarah, they didn't want me to know. They specifically said they weren't going to tell us. They did it because they love us. They just wanted us to be happy. They were humble about it, Sarah. You have no idea the sacrifice they made. Sacrifice? She scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. Please, they probably did it so they could hold it over my head. So, I'd owe them. So I'd have to pretend to like their tacky house and their awful clothes. So I'd have to listen to your dad's boring stories forever. The words struck me harder than any physical blow. The raw, unfiltered contempt. The complete lack of gratitude. The utter cynicism that twisted a profound act of love into a calculated manipulation. They are not holding it over your head, Sarah, I said, my voice rising now, losing its calm. They don't want anything from you. They just want you to be happy. They literally gave up their financial security for you, for us. And you call them trash? You lie about it? You accuse them of trying to manipulate you. Are you hearing yourself right now? She jumped up from the couch, her face contorted in rage. Oh, so now I am the bad guy. I am the villain here. You think I wanted their pity money? I didn't ask for it. I never wanted it. It's humiliating. Do you know how humiliating it is to have your poor old-fashioned in-laws pay off your debts? It makes me look weak. It makes me look like I can't handle my own life. They weren't trying to humiliate you, Sarah, I shouted, my own anger finally boiling over. They were trying to help you, and you called them trash, to my face, while they were giving up everything they had for you. How could you be so cruel? So unbelievably ungrateful. Ungrateful, she shrieked, throwing her hands up in exasperation. I didn't ask for their charity, Mark. And frankly, I am sick of their kindness that comes with a price tag of having to pretend they're not embarrassing every time we see them. You know what? I'd rather have the debt. I'd rather struggle than be indebted to your working class, uncultured parents. The words hung in the air, sharp and poisonous. Working class, uncultured, embarrassing. Charity. It wasn't just about the debt anymore. It was about everything. It was about her fundamental lack of respect, her deep-seated snobbery, her inability to see beyond superficial appearances. It was about the kind of person she truly was, stripped bare of the charming facade. My heart ached, a deep, crushing pain. This wasn't the woman I thought I married. This was a stranger, a cruel, selfish stranger. The fight spiraled from there, a whirlwind of accusations and recriminations. Years of suppressed resentment, years of ignored red flags, years of Sarah's subtle insults, all came crashing down around us. The apartment, once our home, felt like a battleground, and I knew with absolute certainty that something fundamental had broken, and it was never going to be fixed. The apartment was still, thick with a residue of our explosive fight. Sarah had retreated to the bedroom, slamming the door. I stayed in the living room, sprawled on the couch, staring blankly at the ceiling. My chest ached, not from physical exertion, but from the raw, exposed nerves of my heart. The ugly truth, once a quiet suspicion, was now screaming in my face. Working class, uncultured parents. Her words echoed in my head, a vile mantra. This wasn't just about money, or debt, or even the lie. This was about who Sarah fundamentally was. It was about how she saw the world, how she judged people, and how little she valued true kindness and sacrifice. She had called their selfless act charity, something humiliating. She would rather have the burden of debt than be indebted to my parents. The sheer arrogance of it was mind-boggling. She didn't see their love. She saw their social status and found it wanting. She saw a transaction, a source of embarrassment, not a gesture of profound affection. I closed my eyes, trying to piece together the fragments of our relationship. Had I been so blind? Had I deliberately ignored the signs? I remembered all the times she'd subtly belittled my family. The way she'd complain about their simple meals, their modest home, their unsophisticated conversations. I always rationalized it. She just has different tastes. She's from a different background. She doesn't mean any harm. But she did mean harm. Not physical, but emotional. She chipped away at my respect for my parents, at my connection to my roots. She made me feel subtly that I too should be ashamed of where I came from. That their love, their hard work, their very essence was somehow not good enough. And now, here was the ultimate test. They had shown their unconditional love in the most tangible, sacrificial way possible. And her reaction? Disgust, disdain. And that she was put in a position to acknowledge their worth. My stomach churned. How could I live with this? How could I share my life with someone who held such contempt for the very people who gave me life, who taught me what love and sacrifice truly meant? It wasn't just a difference of opinion. It was a fundamental clash of values. I believed in humility, in hard work, in the power of genuine connection. Sarah seemed to believe in appearances, social climbing, and a superficial kind of success. I thought of my parents. Their simple faces filled with concern and love when they talked about Sarah's debt. Their quiet pride in doing something good. Their complete lack of expectation. They didn't want thanks. They didn't want recognition. They simply wanted to make their son and his wife happy. And Sarah had spit in the face of that love. The heartbreak was overwhelming. It wasn't just for the loss of my marriage, which was clearly crumbling around me. It was for the illusion I had built, the carefully constructed fantasy of a life with Sarah, a woman I had thought was kind, loving, and empathetic. She was none of those things, not when it truly mattered. She was selfish, superficial, and cruel. I had tried for years to bridge the gap between my two worlds. My humble, loving family and my ambitious, socially conscious wife. I thought love could conquer all. I thought Sarah would eventually see the beauty in their simplicity, the strength in their character. I had been so wrong. She saw only what she considered their flaws, their lack of sophistication, their trashiness. And the deepest cut of all, what did she think of me then? If my parents were trash, what did that make me? Their son. Did she see me as just one step up, but still inherently flawed by my origins? Had she married me despite my roots, hoping to mold me into something more acceptable to her world? The thought sent a shiver down my spine. This wasn't a temporary fight. This wasn't something we could recover from, with a heartfelt apology and a promise to do better. This was a revelation of character, a fundamental incompatibility that had been hidden under layers of denial and superficial charm. My future stretched out before me, suddenly blank and terrifying. Ending a marriage, breaking a vow. It felt impossible, overwhelming. But living like this, with this contempt, this dishonesty, this constant battle between loyalty to my family and the demands of a wife who despised them, that felt even more impossible. I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that the only path forward for my own sanity and self-respect was to walk away. The pain was immense, a searing, throbbing wound. But staying would be a slow, agonizing death of my spirit. I couldn't let her disrespect my parents, and by extension, disrespect me any longer. My world was shattered, but I was finally seeing clearly. The days that followed were suffocating silence. Sarah and I lived in the same apartment, but it felt like miles separated us. She stayed in the bedroom, emerging only to get food or go to work, her face a mask of cold indifference. I stayed in the living room, trying to work from home, the tension in the air so thick I could almost taste it. Every breath felt like an effort. Sleep offered no escape. My mind replayed Sarah's words, my parents' quiet generosity, the bitter irony of it all. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. Our once shared bed felt like a battlefield, now empty, cold. My parents, oblivious to the storm they had unknowingly unleashed, called a few times. My mum asked how Sarah was doing, if she seemed less stressed now. Each question was a dagger. "Oh, she's doing great, Mum. Really good. Much less stressed." The lie tasted like ash. I couldn't tell them. How could I tell them that their act of profound love had been met with contempt and disgust? How could I shatter their simple joy, their genuine desire for our happiness? It felt like protecting them from a monster I had mistakenly invited into our lives. The guilt was a heavy shroud enveloping me. Guilt for not seeing Sarah's true character sooner. Guilt for allowing her to disrespect my parents for so long. Guilt for now having to break my marriage apart, knowing the pain it would cause, even if it was necessary. Sarah occasionally tried to act as if nothing had happened. She'd leave a half-hearted text about groceries, or ask a mundane question about the bills. But there was no apology, no hint of remorse, no attempt to reconcile. Her silence screamed louder than any argument. It was a clear message. She stood by her words. She saw nothing wrong with her contempt. She expected me to just get over it. I couldn't. Every interaction, every fleeting glance reminded me of the depth of her ingratitude. The debt, once a source of her misery, was now a painful monument to my parents' love and her utter disdain. It was a constant, undeniable presence in our lives, even though the numbers on the screen were zero. I started spending more time out of the house. Long walks, lingering at the office late, grabbing dinner alone. Anywhere but the suffocating atmosphere of our apartment. I called my older sister Emily, and we talked for hours. I didn't tell her all the ugly details of Sarah's words. I couldn't bring myself to. But I told her we were having serious marital problems, that fundamental values were clashing, that I was deeply unhappy. Emily listened, offered advice, and reminded me of my worth and the worth of our family. Her steady support was a lifeline in the stormy seas. "You deserve someone who respects you, Mark," she said one night. "And someone who respects the people you love. That's non-negotiable." Her words resonated deeply. I started picturing life without Sarah. It was terrifying, a leap into the unknown. But also, surprisingly, a glimmer of light. A life free from the constant tension, the unspoken judgments, the need to defend my parents. A life where I didn't have to lie to my family to protect them from my wife. A life where I could be truly myself, without fear of judgment for my roots. The unbearable weight of the situation was slowly, painfully, pushing me towards a decision. I couldn't keep living in this limbo. I couldn't pretend this hadn't happened. Sarah's true colors had been revealed. Not just as a snob, but as someone incapable of gratitude or empathy for people she deemed beneath her. And I knew, with a heavy heart, that I could not build a future with someone like that. The next step would be the hardest, but it was becoming clear it was the only one I could take. The weight had become unbearable. The silence in the apartment, the unspoken tension, Sarah's icy indifference, it was slowly crushing me. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep properly. My focus at work was non-existent. Every moment was consumed by the agonizing realization that the woman I married was not who I thought she was, and that the foundation of our life together had crumbled. I spent countless hours replaying our entire relationship in my head. Were there other signs I had missed? Other red flags I had willfully ignored in my desire to be loved, to have a seemingly perfect life? The rustic scarf, the eye rolls at my dad's stories, the complaints about my parents' house. They weren't just quirks. They were consistent, persistent expressions of disdain. Instead, they had festered, growing into a poisonous resentment that had now erupted. Contrast between Sarah's behavior and my parents' love was a stark, unbridgeable chasm. On one side, pure, unconditional love and selfless sacrifice. On the other, contempt, ingratitude, and a shocking lack of empathy. I couldn't reconcile the two. My loyalty, my heart, belonged unequivocally to the people who had given everything for my happiness, not to the person who had spat on their kindness. The idea of divorce, once a terrifying, distant concept, now felt like an inevitable, painful necessity. It was a heartbreaking realization. I had made vows. I had promised to cherish her, in sickness and in health. But what about when a partner actively disrespects your deepest values? And the people you love most in the world? What about when the person you married reveals a cruel and selfish side you cannot live with? I thought of the future. Could I imagine a life where I constantly had to shield my parents from Sarah's unkindness? A life where their genuine efforts were met with scorn. A life where I had to live with the knowledge of Sarah's lies and her lack of remorse. The answer was a resounding no. It would be a slow, agonizing death of my spirit. I would become resentful, bitter. My love for my parents, a fundamental part of who I am, would be constantly under attack. Courage to make the decision didn't come from anger alone, but from a profound sense of self-respect and respect for my family. I couldn't let this stand. I couldn't allow her to diminish their worth, and I couldn't allow myself to be diminished by staying in a relationship that asked me to compromise my core value. I spent an entire night just sitting, staring at the wall, mentally preparing for the inevitable conversation. I imagined every possible reaction from Sarah. The denial, the anger, the blame, perhaps even a desperate last-minute feigned remorse. I had to be ready for all of it. I had to be firm. This wasn't a negotiation. This wasn't a threat. This was a statement of fact. Our marriage was broken beyond repair. The thought of hurting Sarah, despite everything, still stung. I had loved her. I had envisioned a future with her. But the woman I loved was an illusion, shattered by the cruel reality of her words and her action. Pain of ending a marriage, of breaking a vow, was immense. It was a grief for a future that would never be, for a dream that had turned into a nightmare. But beneath the pain, a tiny flicker of resolve began to burn, a sense of liberation, a quiet determination. I deserved better. My parents deserved better. This wasn't about revenge. It was about integrity. It was about choosing respect over resentment, truth over lies. As dawn broke, casting a pale light into the apartment, I stood up. My body ached, but my mind was clear. The decision had been made. There was no turning back. I would talk to Sarah. I would tell her it was over. And then I would begin the long, painful process of rebuilding my life, one step at a time, grounded in the true love and unwavering support of my trash parents. The conversation would be brutal, but it had to happen. I waited until Sarah was home from work, just after dinner. The apartment was still cloaked in that heavy, suffocating silence. She was on the couch, scrolling through her phone, pretending I wasn't there, pretending the unresolved conflict didn't exist. I walked over, my heart pounding a furious rhythm against my ribs, but my resolve firm. "Sarah," I said, my voice steady though it felt like a stranger's. "We need to talk, properly, about everything." She slowly lowered her phone, her eyes finally meeting mine. Her expression was wary, a flicker of apprehension mixed with a familiar defensiveness. "What is there to talk about, Mark? You've been acting like a martyr all week. Get over it." "I am not acting like a martyr, Sarah," I replied, taking a deep breath. "I'm here to tell you that I can't do this anymore. This isn't working. I want a divorce." The words hung in the air, cold and definitive. For a long moment, she just stared at me, her mouth slightly agape, disbelief warred with shock on her face. Then, as the meaning fully registered, her eyes narrowed, and a slow crimson flush spread across her cheeks. A divorce?" she stammered, her voice incredulous. "You are divorcing me? Over this, over your ridiculous parents and their stupid charity money?" "It's not over this, Sarah," I said, my voice rising slightly, the calm threatening to crack. "It's about respect. It's about honesty. It's about how you speak about the people I love, the people who sacrificed everything for your happiness. It's about your contempt for them and your lies. It's about how you saw their profound generosity as an insult, a humiliation. And it's about the fact that you have shown absolutely no remorse, no gratitude, no understanding of what they did." Her eyes flashed with fury. "So you are choosing them over me? Your working class, embarrassing parents over your wife? After everything we've built?" Her voice was laced with bitter sarcasm. "This is insane, Mark. This is their fault. They interfered, they ruined everything." The accusation, so completely divorced from reality, was almost laughable in its absurdity. "My parents ruined nothing, Sarah," I retorted, my voice firm. "They acted out of love. You, on the other hand, showed me who you truly are. And I can't live with that. I can't be with someone who has such a cruel and judgmental heart. I can't be with someone who looks down on my family, and by extension, on me." "Oh, so now I am cruel," she spat, pushing herself off the couch. "You are just too sensitive, Mark. You are stuck in the past. You are just like them, happy to wallow in your humble origins. I was trying to lift us up, to have a better life, a more sophisticated life. And you are throwing it all away for a bunch of old people, and their money that I didn't even want." Her words, even in her anger, continued to reveal the depth of her contempt. There was no real apology, no genuine regret, just blame and a twisted justification for her snobbery. "This isn't up for debate, Sarah," I said, my voice flat. "My mind is made up. I'll start looking for a place tomorrow. We'll figure out the logistics, the finances, everything. But this is over." The reality of the situation finally seemed to hit her. Her shoulders slumped. Her eyes welled up, but I knew it wasn't true sorrow for what she had done, but for the loss of her comfortable life, her perceived status, her vision of the future. "You'll regret this, Mark," she whispered, her voice trembling but still defiant. "You'll be alone, and all because you couldn't accept who I am." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the living room, the weight of our broken marriage settling heavily around us. The days that followed were a blur of practicalities. Conversations with lawyers, sorting through possessions, each item a painful reminder of a life we had once planned together. Packing boxes. The silence between us, once heavy with tension, now felt like the profound quiet after a storm, leaving behind only debris. Telling my parents was difficult. I sat them down, and with tears in my eyes, I told them Sarah and I were separate. I didn't give them all the raw, ugly details of Sarah's words. I just said we had grown apart, that our values no longer aligned, that we both wanted different things. They were heartbroken for me, but their love and support were immediate and unwavering. My mom held me tight, stroking my hair. My dad just nodded, his eyes filled with quiet understanding. They didn't ask probing questions. They just offered comfort. As I drove away from our apartment for the last time, boxes in the back of a rental truck, I looked back at the building. A part of me was sad, grieving the loss of a dream. But a larger part felt a profound sense of relief. I was free. Free from the contempt, the dishonesty, the constant burden of a relationship that had become toxic. The future was uncertain, terrifying even. But for the first time in a long time, it also felt like it had room for genuine peace. Life after Sarah was a stark contrast. The silence in my new, smaller apartment was no longer suffocating. It was peaceful. It was the quiet of a healing wound, not the silence of a festering one. The initial days were hard, a heavy mixture of loneliness and grief for the lost future. But slowly, imperceptibly at first, a sense of lightness began to settle over me. I spent a lot of time with my parents, more than I had in years. They welcomed me with open arms, their love a steady, unwavering beacon in my shattered world. We'd have dinner, watch movies, my dad would tell his stories. And I'd listen, truly listen, savoring every word, every gesture. There was no more tension, no more need to protect them from Sarah's judgment. I could be completely myself, completely open, with the people who loved me unconditionally. One evening, a few months after the divorce was final, I was sitting with my parents in their living room. My mum was knitting, my dad was reading the paper. The familiar scent of potpourri filled the air. I looked at them, their kind faces, their worn hands, their simple, unpretentious lives. And a wave of overwhelming gratitude washed over me. I finally decided to tell them the full truth, or at least, as much of it as I could bear. "Mum, Dad," I started, my voice thick with emotion. "Here's something I need to tell you about Sarah, about why we divorced." They looked at me, concerned. I took a deep breath and recounted Sarah's words. Her disdain, her calling them trash, her contempt for their kindness, her insistence that she didn't want their pity money, her lies. I told them how those words spoken, just as I discovered their incredible sacrifice, had been the final devastating blow. My mum gasped, her knitting needles falling silent. My dad's face hardened, a rare flash of anger in his usually gentle eyes. They were silent for a long moment, processing. She really said that?" my mom whispered, her voice trembling. After we just wanted to help." "Yes, Mom," I said, my voice breaking. "And it broke my heart, not just for me, but for you, for everything you did. I couldn't stay with someone who had such a lack of respect, such an unkind heart." Tears welled up in my mother's eyes, and she reached out to embrace me, holding me tight. "Oh, my poor boy," she murmured, stroking my hair. "It was never about us. It was her own unhappiness, her own insecurities. You did the right thing, son. You deserve to be happy. We all do. My dad, usually stoic, put a hand on my shoulder, his grip firm. She didn't deserve your love, son. And she certainly didn't deserve ours. You have nothing to be ashamed of. Ever. Their reaction, though sad, was one of profound understanding and unwavering support. It was a cleansing moment, finally shedding the burden of that secret. Knowing they understood, knowing they didn't blame me or themselves, was a monumental relief. The debt, Sarah's debt, was still paid off. It was a strange, tangible reminder of the whole ordeal. I often wondered if Sarah ever thought about it, if she ever, even for a fleeting moment, felt a pang of regret or gratitude. I doubted it. But for me, it was a constant bittersweet symbol of my parents' boundless love. The healing process was slow. There were still days filled with sadness, moments of doubt. But I learned to lean on my family, to appreciate the simple joys in life. I rediscovered hobbies I'd abandoned, reconnected with old friends. I started to see the world with clearer eyes, recognizing that true wealth wasn't in possessions or social status, but in kindness, integrity, and genuine human connection. I learned a painful but vital lesson: never to ignore the red flags, no matter how small they seem. To trust my gut, to value character above all else, and to never ever let anyone make me feel ashamed of my roots, or of the people who shaped me. My parents, my trash parents, had not only paid off a debt, they had inadvertently revealed the truth about my marriage, and in doing so had freed me. They were not trash, they were gold. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly hopeful for a future, built on genuine love, honesty, and unwavering respect. The scars of the past remained, but they were healing, and they made me stronger. I was ready to face the world, no longer heartbroken, but heart whole, surrounded by the purest love I knew.